"Oh my God, why now of all times?" Richard Bennett shouted into the phone, his voice echoing through the glossy stone corridor of the 45th floor, the executive level of Bennett Industries. From his wide glass office, he could see 3 black cars pulling up in front of the main lobby, where the Chinese delegation was stepping out with formal demeanor, punctual as always. Richard, a famously stern and successful CEO who had spent 20 years building this business empire, was now losing control over what seemed like a minor issue. The interpreter had canceled at the last minute. She said it was a family emergency. She can't make it. Claire Donovan, his executive assistant, reported anxiously while still glued to her phone. "I've called every translation service within a 30-mile radius, but no one is willing to take on such a high-level international meeting on such short notice." In 15 minutes, 5 senior executives from Lutan Corporation, one of China's largest tech companies, would step into the conference room to negotiate and sign a $200 million deal. $200 million. And it all hinged on smooth communication between the two parties. A small mistranslation could cause the entire agreement to fall apart. Richard loosened his Italian tie, sweat beginning to form on his forehead. In the business world, everyone knew how strict and nuanced Chinese communication protocols were. Using translation software or relying on gestures wasn't just disrespectful, it was downright unprofessional. No one said anything in that moment. Then a gentle, slightly hesitant female voice rose from the corner of the room. "Excuse me, but I can speak Mandarin." The room fell silent. The speaker was Emily Carter, 28 years old, a janitor who had worked on the executive floor for the past 3 years. She was standing near her cleaning cart, still holding a damp cloth. She wore the familiar dark blue uniform of the cleaning crew, someone most employees had long learned to overlook. Claire frowned, then laughed an awkward, dismissive chuckle. "Emily, are you serious? This is a high-level international meeting, not an introductory Chinese class." Richard looked at Emily for a long moment. She wasn't smiling, wasn't looking away. She just stood there, calm and steady, eyes fixed forward. "Are you serious?" he asked, voice low and cautious. "Yes, I studied East Asian linguistics at Columbia University. I'm fluent in Mandarin, understand Cantonese, and know a bit of Taiwanese. But I had to drop out in my junior year to care for my mother after she lost her job and needed full-time help managing her diabetes." Claire turned away, visibly displeased. Richard was still weighing his options, torn between logic and the fear of losing the deal. But there was something about the way Emily stood quiet, yet resolute, that kept him from brushing her off as a joke. "Prove it," he said simply. "Say something in Chinese." Emily took a breath, then began in crisp, flawless Mandarin. 很高兴在这里见到您，希望我们的合作带来互惠的成果. Though he didn't understand the meaning, Richard could hear the fluency and confidence in her voice, not a hint of hesitation. "What did you just say?" he asked. "I said, it's a pleasure to meet you here. I hope our collaboration will bring mutually beneficial results. It's a standard greeting in Chinese business meetings." End section. Claire folded her arms, lips pressed tightly, clearly unhappy with the direction this conversation was going. "Richard, are you serious? You're going to let a janitor sit at the negotiating table with one of Asia's biggest corporations?" But Richard didn't respond. He had faced many crises before, and he knew that a sharp instinct was what had kept him standing for the past 20 years. "You have 20 minutes, he said. "Find something appropriate to wear. Meet me in the conference room on the 46th floor." Emily nodded, saying nothing more. As she left the room, pushing her cleaning cart toward the emergency stairwell, Claire leaned toward Richard and whispered, "You've lost your mind. When this blows up, don't say I didn't warn you." But Richard didn't reply. Deep down, he had a hunch. The woman everyone in this building had treated as invisible might just be the only one who could save the day. 20 minutes later, the glass door of the conference room swung open. Everyone in the room turned and fell silent. No one recognized her at first. Emily Carter no longer bore the quiet demeanor of a janitor in uniform. Instead, she wore a minimalist black business outfit, temporarily borrowed from the receptionist downstairs. Her hair was neatly tied up, a small notebook in her hands. She looked no different from a senior executive entering a meeting with the director. "Holy Thomas," the CFO blurted out. "Is that her?" Claire Donovan glanced quickly and then whispered to her assistant, "You can polish a lump of coal all you want, but it's still coal inside." Richard stood up, maintaining composure under the curious stares of his colleagues. He introduced her with a steady voice. "This is Emily Carter, our International Relations Officer in charge of the Asian market." Claire nearly choked but managed to swallow it down. Emily bowed slightly, then switched to flawless Mandarin as she welcomed the Chinese delegation just entering the room. 很荣幸见到您，我们非常重视准时，这显示了对合作的尊重。Mr. Liu Cheng, the head of the delegation, gave a slight nod, clear surprise in his eyes. Then he smiled and responded in Chinese. The official meeting had begun. In the first 15 minutes, Emily conducted the meeting with astonishing fluency. She didn't just translate each sentence accurately, but grasped cultural nuances, adjusted her tone gracefully, and even conveyed subtle jokes that made the guests chuckle gently, something not every interpreter could do with such finesse. Richard sat nearby, eyes fixed on Emily. She showed no signs of tension. The way she guided the conversation, adjusted her tone for each speaker, and responded to every emotional shift in the room, transformed what should have been a stiff atmosphere into something natural. But then Claire spoke up. With a sweet smile but icy eyes, she said in English, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Emily, why don't you share a little about your career journey with our distinguished guests? I'm sure they'll be very impressed with where you started." Richard turned to Claire, his eyes warning. But she went on. "It's truly inspiring to see someone reinvent themselves like that, from someone cleaning the conference room to now sitting at this very table." The statement was translated into Chinese, and Emily felt the air in the room tighten. Mr. Liu Cheng's gaze changed, not with contempt but with visible confusion. In Chinese corporate culture, hierarchy and structure are extremely important. An interpreter without clear standing in the company could damage the organization's professional image. Emily remained composed. She responded in Mandarin, evenly. Life teaches us that opportunities often come in the most unexpected ways. She looked directly into Mr. Liu's eyes, then continued, 3 years ago, I cleaned this very room. Today, I am honored to sit beside you as a representative for our company's international dialogue. Silence fell. Richard tried to speak to smooth things over, but it was too late. The natural flow of the meeting had vanished. Everyone remained polite, still smiling, but the eyes of the Chinese delegates had shifted, now observing, not conversing anymore, but assessing. Inside Emily, something quietly broke. For the past 3 years, she had watched, listened, and remembered every behavior of the top managers here, the office politics, the fabricated successes, and most of all, the deliberate wrongdoing. She vividly remembered the day Claire was talking on the phone in the restroom, thinking no one was around. That white girl, always hanging around important meetings like she knows anything. Emily had been outside, silently cleaning the mirrors. No one had known then that every word of scorn had been noted. The meeting ended with a preliminary memorandum. The Chinese delegation said they would review everything carefully before signing officially, a diplomatic way of saying trust had been shaken. As the guests left the room, Claire gathered the documents, barely suppressing a mocking smile. "Well, that was an interesting meeting. Next time we should be a bit more transparent about the participants' credentials, don't you think, Richard?" Richard didn't respond. His face had darkened. Emily stood up, slowly closed her notebook. Her voice was low but firm. "Before leaving, Mr. Liu said something to me." Claire squinted. "What did he say?" "He expressed confusion about our company's structure. In Chinese culture, the person who speaks on behalf of the leadership is usually considered the highest authority in the room. Yet today, no one introduced me as someone with any real authority." She paused, then looked directly at Claire. "He asked me to call him tomorrow, to explain more clearly about the structure and organization of our company. It was a polite way, of saying he wants to speak to me, not someone else. Claire was speechless. Richard said nothing either. Only the quiet snap of Emily closing her notebook echoed, but it sounded as decisive as the first move in a brand new game. After the meeting, Emily returned to the 45th floor in her familiar dark blue uniform, pushing her cleaning cart down the hallway as if nothing had happened. But this time, every step she took had purpose. Every movement, from how she mopped the floor to how she observed the light streaming from empty offices, was part of a larger plan no one else knew about. Claire Donovan walked down the hallway, coffee in hand, chatting and laughing with Jennifer from accounting. When she saw Emily, she didn't bother lowering her voice. At least she's back where she belongs. After today's little show, she should have learned her place. Emily didn't respond. She just kept cleaning, ears sharp, silently recording every word like data logged into a system. No one knew that for the past 3 years, while working quietly, Emily had seen far more than they imagined. She had once seen Claire leave her laptop unlocked with a spreadsheet showing altered contract figures. She had overheard weekend phone calls while she worked alone, shady discussions with outside partners, talks about how to pressure small businesses owned by minorities. She had seen everything. That evening, back in her small apartment in Brooklyn, Emily sat down at her computer. She opened a folder labeled Bennett Internal, a file she had been updating regularly since her first year on the job. 63 pages of documents, internal emails that had been deleted but reprinted, screenshots, weekend call logs, documents left in printers or tossed in trash bins without being shredded. Most notably, 3 files exposing Claire's deliberate exclusion of bids from companies led by people of color or Asian heritage. A part of her still hesitated. She didn't want to destroy anyone. But when Claire humiliated her in front of an international delegation not just once, but repeatedly, Emily knew silence would be self-destruction. The next morning, at exactly 10 a.m., Emily arrived at Mandarin Cafe on 42nd Street, as arranged. Waiting for her was Mr. Liu Cheng, accompanied by a refined woman who introduced herself as Cao Lin, Vice President of International Development at Lutan Corporation. They greeted Emily in Mandarin with warm smiles, their demeanor vastly different from the day before. "Miss Carter," Mr. Liu said, "yesterday I witnessed not just your language skills, but your composure and cultural fluency between 2 worlds. That is incredibly valuable." Cao Lin added, "We are expanding operations in the North American market and need someone like you, someone who has observed how American businesses operate from the inside." They asked her about negotiation strategies, cultural differences in work ethics, and most importantly, how to identify organizations that are not transparent in their dealings with partners. Emily answered clearly, with concrete examples. She never mentioned Claire by name, but made it clear how those in power often manipulated the truth for personal gain. After an hour and a half of discussion, Cao Lin handed her a business card. "Parker, Associates, International Strategy Consultant, with a salary 5 times her current income, and one single condition. Help us audit all contracts between Bennett Industries and our Asian partners." They suspected fraud and wanted an insider to expose it. That night, Emily called her mother. "Mom, do you remember when you told me patience is the greatest weapon of a smart woman?" "Of course, sweetheart. Why?" Emily smiled. I finally understand what you meant." The next morning, the Bennett office was shaken by urgent news. The Chinese delegation had officially submitted a request for an internal investigation regarding contract violations and had specifically requested Emily's presence at a special board meeting. Claire, still in her striking red suit, confidently walked into the boardroom, holding a 2-page speech ready to place the blame for the failed deal on an inexperienced janitor who rose too fast. But as the door opened, Emily entered, this time wearing no one's borrowed clothes. She wore a sleek gray suit, her hair tied in an elegant bun, carrying a laptop and a portfolio. Her steps no longer belonged to someone begging for a chance, but to someone who knew she had every right to speak. Claire froze. Richard simply said, She was invited by our partner. Emily gave a slight nod and opened her laptop. After yesterday's meeting, Mr. Liu spoke privately with me about certain irregularities in the signed contracts. I reviewed them and found numerous pieces of evidence pointing to price manipulation, non-transparent partner selection, and internal discrimination. She connected to the projector. The screen displayed Claire's email to an external partner, disclosing secrets about a competitor, altered cost spreadsheets, photographs of modified contract pages, and an audio recording from the building's security system. We can't let someone like her think she belongs in the executive boardroom. Claire turned pale. Emily lifted her gaze. At that moment, she was no longer the woman who mopped the floors. She was the woman who held the entire truth. The conference room on the 46th floor was unnaturally silent. The air thickened with each of Emily's words. The board members, people well-versed in financial reports and growth charts, now sat like statues before the chilling, concrete evidence laid out before them. On the large screen, Emily displayed one document after another, collected over her 3 years of working invisible on the executive floor. An internal email from Claire to a client, revealing a competitor's pricing, a serious breach of confidentiality. A manipulated cost sheet, with a red column clearly marked edited in the file's revision history. A video clip from the internal security camera showing Claire speaking with Thomas, the CFO, about discarding applications from candidates whose names sound kind of immigrant. And then the final audio clip Emily had saved for last. We can't let people like her think they belong at the negotiating table. They're here to clean, not to represent the company. Claire's voice rang out through the speakers, dripping with disdain, undeniable and unedited. Claire shot to her feet, face pale. This is a setup. She planned this from the start to bring me down. This is a personal vendetta revenge. Richard remained seated. His face was stone, his eyes cold as he looked at the woman who had been his right hand for 7 years. Miss Carter, he said, turning to Emily, voice low. I'm sorry, but I need to ask, how did you obtain these materials? Emily didn't flinch. By observing. By using the invisibility all of you gave me. She continued slowly. For the past 3 years, I've been in almost every meeting room. Not because I was invited, but because I had to clean up after every meeting. You left documents on the table, laptops open, phones unlocked. You discussed budgets in the hallways, made calls in the restroom. I never had to sneak around. I just listened. Claire leapt up, nearly shouting. Who are you to judge me? You're just a janitor. You think a few documents can erase 15 years of my work? No, Emily replied, her voice steady. You erased it yourself. The HR director, sitting at the head of the table, spoke for the first time. Claire, what you just said and everything we've just heard is unacceptable. This is no longer an internal matter. These are ethical violations, and they may constitute criminal behavior. Oh. Richard leaned forward, hands on the table, eyes locked on Claire. You have 30 seconds to explain why you shouldn't be terminated immediately for unlawful conduct and racial discrimination. And another 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't forward all this evidence to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Claire's eyes darted around the room. No one came to her defense. Even Thomas, once so chummy with her, had turned away. Her voice shrank, trembling. You're all making a huge mistake. She's nothing. A cleaning lady who speaks well. That's all. Richard cut her off coldly. She is Bennett Industries' new Director of International Relations. And you, Claire, are terminated. The room remained silent. Claire stood frozen, then staggered as she got to her feet. Security will escort you out of the building. All access privileges are being revoked immediately, Richard added. And Claire, she turned back, eyes red. You will be investigated. We're submitting all evidence to the prosecutor's office. As she walked out, Claire cast one last glance at Emily, a look mixed with hatred, humiliation, and a trace of unspoken regret. You might have won today, she hissed through clenched teeth, but that doesn't change who you are. Emily stood, face calm. You're right. she said softly. I'm the one you never saw. Until it was too late. 3 hours later, after the meeting concluded, Richard called Emily into his office. When did you start preparing all of this? He asked, still clearly in awe. Emily smiled for the first time in days. When people treat you like furniture in the office, you learn one thing. Furniture has eyes and ears. Richard leaned back in his chair and exhaled. Claire overestimated herself and underestimated you. That was her biggest mistake. Emily looked out the window, where sunlight poured over the Manhattan skyline. I wasn't here for revenge, she said. I just wanted to be recognized for what I'm capable of. 6 months later, Emily Carter sat in her new office on the 38th floor. In front of her was a glass desk, covered in documents written in 3 languages: English, Mandarin, and Korean. The Korean delegation has arrived, Jennifer, her new assistant, reported. They're eager to meet the person who helped Bennett Industries close over $400 million in contracts in just 6 months. Emily nodded, adjusting her navy blazer, no longer a uniform, but a symbol of choice. Elsewhere in the city, in a small rental apartment in Queens, Claire sat in front of her computer screen, watching as Emily's face appeared on the cover of Business Week. The headline in bold: The Interpreter Who Changed the Rules of Global Business. For the first time in months, Claire shed tears. Not of anger, not of self-pity, but of regret, and maybe, just maybe, a little remorse. 8 months after Claire Donovan was dismissed, Emily Carter walked into the Grand Hall of Columbia University, the place where she once studied linguistics, and had to quietly drop out in her junior year. Today, she wasn't returning to ask for re-enrollment. She had come to present a scholarship she had personally founded, the Second Chance Program, a scholarship for students forced to leave school due to family circumstances. No one should have to choose between caring for a loved one and pursuing their own dreams, Emily said to an audience of 500 attentive students. She didn't preach, nor did she share an inspirational journey, as some might have expected. She simply told the truth that sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage, if you know how to observe, listen, and maintain calm when it matters most. The ceremony ended with a standing ovation and prolonged applause. Some students cried. Some parents hugged Emily, thanking her not just for the financial support, but for the recognition. One young woman even grabbed her hand and said, "I won't give up anymore." At that very moment, back at Bennett Industries, Richard Bennett was meeting with the board of directors. For the first time in the company's history, quarterly revenue had surpassed $700 million, thanks to contracts from South Korea, China, and Taiwan, all secured under Emily's leadership. Richard stood and spoke. None of us could have predicted that the woman once pushing a cleaning cart through our hallways would be the one to place Bennett Industries on the global map. But that proves something. Talent doesn't come from a title, it comes from the ability to act when others are still busy judging. He pointed toward a newly framed photo on the wall. Emily shaking hands with Mr. Liu Cheng in Beijing. Beneath the caption, "When language is the key, silence becomes strength." Is this? The room erupted in applause. That evening, in her new modern apartment on the Upper East Side, Emily received a call from her mother. "I saw you on television today," her mother said, voice choked with emotion. "You spoke beautifully about persistence and second chances." "You taught me that, Mom," Emily said with a soft laugh. "I just passed it on." As in? On her desk was a list of 5 lower-level employees at the company, people she was personally mentoring. An IT technician often dismissed for lacking communication skills, a receptionist unfairly blamed for someone else's mistake, an older woman in logistics who once worked as a university teaching assistant. Emily saw herself in them, and she had made a decision. True success wasn't about having an office with a skyline view. It was about using that seat to pull others out of the shadows. Somewhere else in the city, in a small rented apartment in Queens, Claire Donovan sat before a computer screen, a cup of cold tea in hand. On her table lay job rejection letters, unpaid therapy bills, and a newspaper featuring Emily on the cover. The headline read, "The Janitor Who Taught Corporate America a Lesson in Respect." Mess. Claire sighed. There was no more rage, no more envy. Only the weariness of someone who had finally realized far too late that her condescending words, judgmental looks, and dismissive tone had helped shape the strongest person she ever tried to tear down. Weeks later, a television reporter asked Emily during a live interview, "Do you resent Claire Donovan? Did you want revenge?" Emily paused for a moment, then answered calmly, "Number. Claire gave me the greatest gift, a lesson in the kind of person I never want to become. She taught me that true power doesn't lie in your title, but in how you treat those with less than you. Do you think you won?" Emily looked straight into the camera. A gentle smile crossed her face. Victory isn't when you bring someone down. It's when you build something so solid that what they did to you no longer matters. And so it was. In those 3 years of being seen as just the janitor, Emily Carter watched, listened, and prepared. Not to destroy anyone, but to build a position worthy of her abilities and dignity. Her invisibility hadn't weakened her. It had made her the most attentive listener in a world where everyone else wanted to speak. The invisible interpreter didn't just translate languages between nations. She translated for the world a deeper truth, that a person's true value isn't found in appearance, title, or background, but in quiet perseverance, resilient intellect, and irreplaceable dignity. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you feel it's worth sharing, please send it to your friends and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next videos. While you're waiting for the next story, I've already picked out a few others I think you'll love. They're waiting for you right here. Wishing you a wonderful day.